Longevity Lifestyle Designers. This is Zach here, Secrets of Longevity.com. If you're familiar with my videos, you've seen the symbol that comes up on the screen at the start of every video, and it's called the Tai Chi, and it has the dragon encircling it, but it's also known as the Yin-Yang symbol. And this is of Taoist origin, the creation of this symbol. And many people are familiar with the idea of what that symbol basically means, and it's basically the interplay of opposites. You have the, in my case on the symbol, it's the purple representing the yin and the black representing the yang, or it can be seen the other way. It's kind of an unconventional color scheme, but basically one represents the masculine, one represents the feminine, or it can be seen as hot and cold, or dark and light. Now this is an example of a polarity paradigm, I guess you could call it, or philosophy. So while this is Taoist in origin, the term polarity, as it's understood in that way, could be applied to a few other systems, and they're often mystical in origin, or I guess you could say metaphysical. There's no term that does it justice, but different systems around the world use these terms, or rather the explanation of how reality works, and they generally use this polarity-based framework. Now what I want to discuss is the difference between polarity and duality, which a lot of people do either mix together consciously or unconsciously. And I think it's important to delineate between the two so that you do understand things properly, and you can actually use what in my view is the more beneficial system, which is polarity mindedness, rather than coming from a dualistic standpoint and view of the world. Because if we are in the dualistic mindset, which is viewing things as good and evil, or good and bad, or healthy and unhealthy, then we can get locked into dogma. And it's my opinion that a lot of the philosophical systems that became or are religions come from a dualistic standpoint. They believe in heaven and hell, God and the devil, or what's right and what's wrong. And there's very little acceptance of things just being naturally the way they are, and perhaps that harm or imbalance that's in there is what's causing an imbalanced quality to come forward. So if you're not following me, if we were to take the same idea of duality and polarity and apply it to health, so this isn't talking about spirituality now, it's talking about health. The dualistic mindset is seen in approach of, again, it's good and bad. So, eat these things, they're good. Don't eat these things, they're bad. Do this kind of practice or exercise, it's good. Don't do this, it's bad. So you can see it's very black and white, but that's using the term black and white because black and white would be a polaric term, because black isn't inherently bad and white isn't inherently good. But it's basically breaking it down into good and evil. Whereas with a polaric viewpoint, we'd say, well, that exercise is good for you if you need that aspect or that energy boosted in your life, and this exercise would be good if you wanted that aspect or energy boosted in your life. So I'm not saying one is better than the other. And same with food. You could say, well, that food would be suitable for you if you were in a position to need it, and this food could be beneficial for you if you're in a position to need it. So this is apparent in health, in the philosophies of Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, even Western herbalism. They broke things down into a polaric type of view of health, which incorporated even more subcategories like the 4 elements. And in Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, they use the elements as well. But at a hierarchy, or the uppermost point of it, they have that idea of masculine and feminine, or black and white, night and day, up and down. So all these things, you can't say one is good, one is bad. They're basically opposites. So you need them both in the world, in reality, to have balance, to have the existence of the other. Because you can't have night without day, you can't have women without men, and men without women. So this idea of a yin-yang interplay between these different things there's no fighting between the two polar opposites. There's no aggression or attack between the two. Whereas in the dualistic framework of reality, there's a lot of head-to-head action going on. Good versus evil. Bad versus good. Vegans versus carnivores. Liberals versus conservatives. So, if you understand what I'm getting at, I'm saying that if we step back and take on this idea of polarity as our way of being in the world. We don't have to give ourselves a label like Taoist or a yogi or anything like that. You can if you want to, if you feel that suits you, and you can embody that label as long as you don't identify with it to the point where you create a duality and you push away and say everything else is bad. So that's what happens in religion, in my point of view, is that someone adopts a certain label, and anything that's not within that label is seen as bad or sin or the devil, or inherently evil in some way, and is attempting to take you out of that framework of being in that label. So the polarity standpoint of philosophy or way of being in the world can apply to all things from relationships to health, to spirituality, to wealth and abundance and business and having a career path. And that's essentially where the Taoists were sort of going with it. But at one point, Taoism was taken and turned into a religion. I personally don't identify myself as a Taoist. I do enjoy the symbolism and philosophy that it has brought into the world, and I enjoy its perspective on health and some of their health practices. But I'm also involved in the Ayurvedic view of things, and also what could be called Hermeticism. And at that core of all of these systems, and even native systems, shamanic systems, they have that polarity, which is a very peaceful way of being. It's not based on trying to separate the world into good and evil. So this basic core foundational belief system that a lot of people still hold, and I see it in modern medicine, but also in holistic medicine, when you have that sort of treating the symptom type mentality, or slash and burn type mentality, that you have to eliminate all the bad. Now there's a time and place for that. When you do have something that is literally attacking you, you do have to fight back and overcome it, whether it's a parasite, a virulent infection or virus, a physical attacker, whether it's an animal or human they're attacking you, you have to fight back to survive. So when it comes down to a basic survival level, we do enter into that duality state of reality, and we need to overcome the adversary. And that's the way our immune system is designed. It needs to overcome the invaders on the body. And it does separate things into good and bad. Your body and all its tissues are good, so your immune system doesn't attack your tissues, and foreign invaders are bad, and they get labeled literally by the white blood cells as things that need to be gobbled up. Now, in some cases of autoimmune disease, your body will start attacking itself, and that's obviously a problem. But if we come back to the idea of polarity, it's a way of being and perceiving the world that is based on recognizing the flow between opposites and not getting caught up in the harsh everyday battles that are going on. Don't want to say on a lower level, because right away by saying that you'd be subjecting yourself to duality, because you're saying I'm above this other stuff and it's therefore bad and I'm good. But it's eliminating good and bad, good and evil. So been involved and actively pursuing all the things that I talk about on my channel for some time now, specific things in spirituality or philosophy do come up in my mind as being sort of like hooks that get into people's framework of perceiving the world that are from a dualistic mind point or viewpoint. And the problem with that is you start to see yourself as elevated than other people, and any philosophy or practice or system that starts to bring that into your consciousness is going to cause problems, and actually health problems, and technically could affect your longevity. And while I do acknowledge that in religions there are polarized parts of them, and you do see long-lived people that were part of religion, but inherently whenever you start to see yourself as doing things, and because you're doing them you're better than other people, then you do get trapped into the dualistic mindset. And from a polarized standpoint, or the view of polarity, all you see is someone being either way too yang, or active, heating, that type of personality, or they could be way too yin, passive, not being able to function in the world. And there's a definite issue because this just becomes an imbalance, not so much of a good and evil kind of thing. It's just they're either balanced in terms of their polarity, or they're imbalanced and they're veering to one side or the other. And that's where you start to see people making wild assertions like, because I do this, I'm better than you, whether it's for health, spiritual, or political reasons. And we just really have to start to learn to see through that and not judge others for it, but just acknowledge that and take note that we're not going to make that same ego-based mistake in our own lives. So the key to remember what's going on between the difference of duality and polarity is that polarity, there's an attraction or attractive force that magnetizes these two poles together, the masculine and feminine. It's very attractive. Whereas the dualistic mindset is one of fighting and repelling and basically attacking each other and trying to break the other one down. And we mustn't get caught into labeling things that are polarized as dualistic, such as yin and yang, masculine and feminine. Good and evil doesn't actually fit into yin and yang because it's a dualistic concept, and this is a polarized symbology. So if you have two things that are interplaying and attracted to each other, you can't have good and evil because they repel each other. And some people do slot the good and evil paradigm or any other dualistic mindset into this interplay of yin and yang and describing that's what those qualities describe, but it doesn't work because it's a polarized system, not a dualistic fighting or opposing system. So I hope this hasn't gotten too abstract for you. It's just been something that's been on my mind lately and I wanted to share it with you guys. So let me know what you think of the whole concept that I've been explaining here, and remember to embrace life without limits.